Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar, How to Develop Your Own Visual Scheduler for Dynamics 365 Business Central. My name is Martin, I'm the CEO and one of the owners of NETRONIC Software, and I'm the host of this webinar today. But today we have it a little bit different than all the other webinars because with me is Sasha. Sasha is our CTO and he will be the one who is actually delivering most of the content, if not all, for this webinar. So let's start with a couple of housekeeping things. By default, you're all on mute in this webinar because we don't want to get disturbed by some unwanted background noises. But of course, you can discuss with us, you can chat with us, and you can ask any kind of question either during the webinar or afterwards. So I know you have all my contact details, and Sasha will share his contact details with you guys also at the end of this webinar. If you have a question in between, then please use the GoToWebinar chat pane and type in your question there. And if the kind of presentation flow allows, I will interrupt Sasha and then ask the question so that you definitively during the course of this webinar will get an answer to your questions. And like I said, the nature of this webinar is a little bit different than the others. So you know that we as NETRONIC are a company building visual scheduling add-ins and visual scheduling extensions for Business Central and NAV. And most of the webinars that we do are around these extensions that we have, the standard extensions like the Visual Production Scheduler, the Visual Job Scheduler, the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler that bring functional knowledge, that bring functional enhancements to standard Business Central. The webinar today is a little bit different because we want to look behind the scenes and we want to actually look at technology that we have built that help us build our visual scheduler. And the good news is that internal development technology that we have to build our own visual schedulers is also available for you guys so that you can take this software to build your own visual scheduler. And as this is a topic for a person with much more technical experience and expertise that I have, I'm really happy that Sasha today is with me in this webinar. And with this, Sasha, the stage is yours and I mute myself. So let's tell us how we can develop an own visual scheduler with what we call the development toolbox.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And yeah, hi all, this is Sasha. And I would like to show you how to develop your own scheduler. So, and therefore I would like to start with this one. So here are some screenshots of our extensions where we use our own control add-in or our own tool to make visual scheduling software. So this is just an impression up front. And the next one, Dynamics 365 overall is a great ERP system. And I think all of us know this already. And it's additionally a really great technical platform as well. So, but out of the box, there's a lack of graphical controls to work with. So especially rich visual controls, which allow user interactions for data editing. So when we look at some screenshots of Business Central, so the typical citizens of Business Central are list pages, which we see here on the left side, or a card page here on the right side. There we have a little bit of a graphic on the top right. And in the lower middle, there we have the role center page, where some more graphics come into play, where you have these queues and, for example, this Power BI inclusion. But these are more or less the things you're used to with Business Central. So, but when it comes to a really more or less full screen visual graphical editor, this is nothing you can find out of the box in Business Central. So, but Microsoft knows this, and to let us fill this gap on our own, Dynamics offers the so-called control add-in object. So I added a link to this here, to the developer pages of Microsoft, where the native object, the so-called control add-in, is described. And this is a quote from Microsoft here. The control add-in object allows you to add custom functionality to Dynamics 365 Business Central. A control add-in is a custom control or visual element for displaying and modifying data within a page. So, and NETRONIC makes use of exactly this object type with the visual scheduling add-in development toolbox. So, the visual scheduling add-in development toolbox is a control add-in. And this is a new visual element you can place onto a standard Business Central page. This control add-in provides an API by which you can interact with it in two ways. One way is to send data into the control add-in, which should get visualized. And the other thing is to receive events from this control add-in on user interactions where you can react on. So, and you'll have a short look how to, in the first case, just get an impression of what does that mean to have a control add-in on a page. So, and therefore I switch over to my development machine and open up Visual Studio Code. I hope all of you know this. This is a technical webinar, so I hope nobody is afraid of this. So, and what you see here is already a page. So this is just the demo page, and all I have put on this page is a user control. So this is the element I've put on this page, and all I need to do is to react on a certain trigger, and this trigger is coming from this control add-in, so from our control add-in. It's called request settings. We pass over 3 settings. This is a license key and then start and an end date, and then pass this over to this control add-in. So, and then I can show you what's happening. So I let this thing package and run. So, and this is already the page I have designed there. So this doesn't look much, I would say, but it's more than than in the first impression you see. So what we see here is the page. This is the standard Business Central page, but on this page we have now a control add-in, a new visual element on this page, and this visual element starts here on the top left and ends here in the bottom right. So, and this is the canvas where this visual element is placed on. So, and this is the native control add-in. So what we see here now is a pretty empty Gantt chart, but already this empty Gantt chart has certain information. So if you remember, I had to set 3 values. One is the license key. This is just for us that this is licensed and has a certain runtime. So we can give out evaluation versions for this. And the other thing were a start and end date. And start and end date are already the 2 values which define where this time scale on top starts and ends. So, and you see already when I hover over with the mouse that you get certain highlights here. So, and I would like to show you that there are already some interactions which are possible to this Gantt chart even without any further data. So when I click here on this time scale and drag it with the mouse, I can move over this horizontally, this time scale to the left or right. So by this, I can move my time frame where I'm looking at. And I can use make use of my mouse wheel to zoom in and out this time frame. So this is the maximum zoom, and there you can see I started with the 1st of January and ended end of February. So this is the time frame this control-it-in visualizes. And then I can zoom in and out and drag. And I can click on these highlighted elements, for example, on this week 3. And when I click on this, we automatically zoom into this week. And when I click on this day, we are zooming into this day. And by clicking these buttons here, I can zoom out again, or by this button, scroll to the right or scroll to the left as an alternative to a mouse move. And you already see some dashed lines which define where the week starts or ends. So this is already the functionality of the control-it-in even without any further data inside of it.
So quick interruption from my side. Before you continue, we had the question if we make this available for viewing at a later stage. And of course, we record this session, and then I would say latest by Thursday, the recording is available on our website, and we will also send a link to the page where you can view the recording again. Sorry for the interruption, Sasha.
No problem. Okay. Fine. So now something to the architecture. I will get into this later a little bit more, but the important thing is on the right side, we now see this is our visual scheduling control-it-in. This is coming from us, NETRONIC. And on the left side, we have more or less the ISV product you probably plan to build. But what I did now is more or less this AL code. So I coded some stuff, and I started to interact with this visual control-it-in. So, and this is done by certain function calls and transferring logical objects of this control-it-in back and forth. So I'm sending over certain objects to this control-it-in, and when I have interactions inside of this control-it-in, I get events, and inside of these events, I often get objects transferred over as well, so that I know what interactions happened inside of the control-it-in. So this is just an overall top-level view to distinguish that on the right side we have the control-it-in, and on the left side is more or less all the Business Central stuff with the AL code, and in your cases NIV or Business Central tables will connect your code to and transfer over to the control-it-in to visualize these things. Okay, so now we start to really develop our own scheduler. So, and therefore, as I said, the control-it-in is a visual element on a page. We have visual building blocks inside of this control-it-in. And one of these building blocks are activities. The important thing with activities are that we have one activity per line or per row when we look at the visualization. This is something like a Microsoft project view, and these activities can be grouped or put on different levels via parent IDs. So, and I will show you this now in another short code demo. So, and the important thing here is, so we are here already in a function I created, which is called load activities. So this is a function call I do from the page to generate the data which is passed over via an API call to the control-it-in. So, and as I'm here in the AL world, we transfer data between Business Central and the control-it-in by so-called JSON elements. So JSON elements are JSON objects or JSON arrays. So these are also native objects in the AL language. And here I make use of this. So I create a new JSON object, and then I can set certain properties or values to this object. So one important thing is that I set an ID. So every activity needs a unique ID, and I can set a table text. So, and I put this on the header 1. When I have this object, I add this to a list, p activities. This is an array I've passed over in this function. So, and I do this multiple times here. So by this, I create here on top, I just focus on these 3 here, 1, 2, 3 objects, in this case activities, and set the values for the table text to header 1, 2, and 3. And I have some additional objects here down there later. But I just let this run, and then we see what comes up. So, as I said, this is something which might slightly look at like Microsoft Visual Project. So you have here all your activities, and here the bars representing the task which this activity should do with start and end dates. So I was focusing on the header elements and the first side on the code. So these 2 lines here already generate 1 line inside of my visualization. So this is important. And when it comes to activities, so, and you see that these lines don't have any bars here inside of it. So, and when it comes to these activities here, I can scroll down, that you see I have an ID as well. And then I have additional properties called start and end. So, and these define the start and the end of these activities. I can set a color as well. I can set a text which should be on the bar, which could be different than the one in the table. I could add a tooltip, and this is already what I have here. So we have the title in the bar, in the table, the title on side of the bar, and when I hover over with the mouse, I get the tooltip information. So this is all achieved just by these few lines inside of the code. So, but what you see, these are all on the same level. So, and as I mentioned on the slide, I can put this, I can start to group these. The moment they are all on the same level, but I can make this activity here by just adding a parent ID. So this defines that this activity has a parent, and the parent has the ID act header 01, and this is this object. So, and just by adding this parent ID here, and I repeat this for all the other activities I have in here. I think that's it. Yep. Package again, and then let's see what comes up. So now you see that I now have the activity 1 here as a sub-element of the header 1, and these 2 activities as sub-element of the header 2. So just by using this parent ID, you could start to group or indent these activities here, depending on your structure you would like to visualize. So these are the simplest activities we have here. So but we have additional visual properties on these activities as well. So because in your projects you want to visualize, you probably have more information to show, and these information can be supported by certain visual elements. So, and here, for example, I can show you this here. When I expand this group here now, I get additional activities. So they are more or less defined in a similar way. I can show you in the code later, like the ones above, but we just have some additional properties set on these activities. And here, in case of the activity 800, we have a so-called baseline. So you can make use of this baseline. This is the small line here on the bottom, so that you can define, okay, where was my activity before, before I moved it, and that you define or save some kind of baseline and visualize this as well. Or you have a due date symbol here. We have additional status symbols on the bar, at the end of the bar, as a rectangle or a circle, or a rectangle in front. These are all individual selectable if you want to see them or not, and which color. We have a so-called progress bar, where you can show maybe how much progress or how much of a certain task is already done. You can show activities in kind of a summary bar. So if one activity, for example, on a grouping level, should summarize all the indented sub-activities, you can make use of this summary bar. Or we have additional symbols here with these dashed lines, which mark, for example, here the earliest start and here the latest end, so that the user should only move these bars inside of these time frames. So, and let's just switch over to the code. You can see this here. So this is, for example, the activity with the baseline. If you want to see or make use of the baseline element, you just need to add these two properties here, that the baseline start and end. And then this activity in this row has this baseline symbol. So, and yeah, all of these properties and much more are also documented in the supporting documents we give you with them. I will show you later, but just to give you a glance of how this is done here. So the same here, creating all the objects, setting properties, and at the end passing over a list of these objects over to the controller tin. One certain thing I would show you is this one. Let me just check. Earliest drag start and latest drag end. This is the activity 800. So this is an interesting thing. When I drag this now, you see now these gray curtains on the right and the left side. So this is something which supports the interactions. So if you have a certain activity which is only allowed to happen in this time frame, you can set these values as well and support the user when rescheduling activities, that it's only or should only be placed inside of this time frame. So, and what we now already saw as well, when I drop this activity now, you see the information which comes up inside of the events which are sent over to Business Central as a back information. So this is just a message box showing the information in this event to visualize this. So, but this says that a certain object, and in this case, it's the activity SH800 was moved and has a new start and end date. So, and this is what happens when someone moves the bar inside of the visualization. If it's this one or any activity you have in there, You now see some tool tips here as well with the new start and end dates. And you see I now drop it on the 13th of January at 2:23, and this matches the new start and end date. So what's happening here is the user drops the bar at the new position. You get in your AL code the event with the new position, and then your business logic can decide what to do, if this is allowed or not, if this can be placed at this time, and if the duration stays the same or not. And if this is the case and everything is okay, then you need to update the information of this activity. So this activity won't change on its own just by being dragged here. So as you see, when this event comes up, currently in my demo code, I don't do any update. So after the drop, the activity is on its own old position again. So what needs to be done in the event is that you update according to your business logic this activity with the new values. And if you do this, then this activity would be placed at another point in time. Okay. So, and as I mentioned, activities, they have additional visual properties. They have baseline, they have a due date, this is this diamond symbol, status flags, these rectangles and circles inside of the bar, a progress bar, a summary bar, constraint symbols. So, and with all these visual elements, you can design your planning board and support the user, that the user knows what these activities are and how he can interact with them. Okay, so this is more or less what we have seen in the live demo. So the next visual building block are resources. So the important thing is we have one resource per line or per row, pretty similar to the activities. But the resource on its own has no bars. They are just containers. So, and these can be put on different levels via parent IDs, pretty similar to the activities as well. So let's switch over to the demo code. So, and let us create some resources. So I have a load resources function here, which creates similar to the activities, a JSON object and sets parameters. So again, a unique ID, a table color, a table text color, and a tooltip. This multiple times here. And when I run this, we have this kind of view. So this is the so-called resource view. The view we had before is the so-called activity view. In this view, we only show activities. In the resource view, we only show resources. So, and you can switch between these views by giving the controller in a setting which view should be activated. So in the resource view, as said, we have all the resources. In this case, I already grouped them here, that Linda, Mark, and Macy have a parent ID, and the parent ID is department 01. So, and you see the no group has a different background color. So these are the options with coloring resources. So, and on the right side, we have our diagram section and the time scale again. The important thing here is, and this is really important, is that you currently see here on all the resources, on all the rows of the resources, a more or less grayish background. And the grayish background is the definition for non-working time. So, but resources typically have a calendar, and with these calendars they have a working and non-working time. So, and this is something we need to create as well. So we need to define calendars with working and non-working time, and we can assign these calendars to these resources. So, and I can do this in my code now. Here I have already set up that the resource has a certain calendar ID, but I did not create or did not transfer these calendars yet to the control.in. And as the control.in did not get any information about these calendars, they could not be shown. So you can scroll down and look at this here. So this is a calendar element. I have a calendar object, and this calendar object consists of multiple calendar entries. So they have, every entry has a start and an end date, and we can define if this is working time or non-working time. In this case, it's working time, because the standard value for a resource without a calendar is complete non-working time. So with all the calendars, I can define all the working times. So, and here I have two entries starting at a certain date here at 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the evening, 2 times. And this is my calendar G000. So, and here on the bottom, I created something similar, but I just looped over the date record to create entries for every day in my time range I'm visualizing. So this is just a trick or helpful from Business Central to make a loop over all the days. So and now I just need to activate that I sent over these calendars as well. Let me see here. Give it a run. So now I hope this meeting transfers these colors that you can see this or distinguish this. You see here now a grayish and a white background. So, and this is the important thing. Now you can see that the department 1 has working time here starting from Monday and ending on Friday. And Linda has working time on every day, somewhat between 8 and 6 and 8, I think. 6 in the morning and 6 in the evening. Yeah. So, and no working time over the night. So this calendar is important when we start to create so-called allocations afterwards. So, but just to keep in mind, we have resources, and these resources have calendars. Okay. So the next, what we do is we create allocations. So allocations represent a piece of work on a resource. And there can be multiple allocations per resource. And this is the difference to an activity. So let's check my code. Can close this one and open this one. Pretty much the same function, load allocations. I create a JSON object again, and as with all the other objects, all they have unique IDs. And then it starts again that we put additional properties on them. So in this case, we have an allocation, and then we allocate this one to a certain resource. So in this case, to the resource with the ID r_Linda. So this is the resource I created earlier. So in this allocation then gets entries with start and end date. I have here a slightly easier allocation, so just focus on this. So start and end for this allocation. I set in color and some text and tooltips again, and then we can have a look at this, how this works out. So this is the important part and the first step. So these are allocations. So, and it's important that these are the resources and these are the allocations. And I just see that I did not put in just one allocation per resource, but it's possible that you have here multiple allocations per resource, and this would result in multiple bars in one of these rows. So this is the important thing in contrast to activities where you always have one bar per row. So in these allocations, I have a start and an end date. And here we have a start and end date which overlaps a non-working time. And now you see why it's important to define these calendars. Because in these non-working times, these allocations or these tasks are not worked on by this resource. So this is some logic built already into the control engine, that when this is defined as a non-working time, you're not allowed to place an allocation inside of this area interactively. So, and when I move this now into this area, you see that it just jumps over and continues on the next possible working time. So, and this is important why you need calendars here and working time. Because if you have non-working time all over a resource, you cannot move a bar here anywhere. So, and here you see as well, when I move this one, this can overlap as well two days. And this is just a visual support for the user that sees, okay, these bars cannot be placed in the non-working time and they already get extended to the next day. But the duration of this task is kept the same. So the duration of the working time this allocation has. Okay. So allocation consists of separate allocation entries. This is something I jumped a little bit over in my code here, because here we only had one entry, but an allocation can consist of multiple entries. And these entries are the blocks inside of one allocation. And you can see here I created two entries. They are put into an array as well. And then given this allocation. And what does this mean? So when I have an allocation with multiple entries like this one here, we can support two things. So this is one allocation here, starting here and ending here, but with two entries. The first entry starts here, ends here, and the second entry starts here and ends here. So this is, for example, useful when you're in the production environment. And in Business Central, you have production order routing lines, which typically have one start and one end date. But these routing lines are not occupying the resource all the time. So they have just certain times where these routing lines occupy a resource, and you can build this with these allocation entries. So by this you can say, okay, we have one allocation here, but the resource is only used during this time span and this time span. Another possibility or way how you can use this allocation entries is to give them different colors. So, and by that you can, for example, have an allocation here, and then you can highlight, for example, the setup time in a different color than the runtime. But overall, both times belong to the same overall operation, and in this case, the so-called allocation. And you're moving them all together. So you're always moving the complete allocation. You're not moving individual allocation entries. So the same here, when I grab this, I'm moving the whole bar and not just these blocks inside of these bars. So this is important to know for allocations. So they consist of separate allocation entries. They visualize separate time spans inside of an allocation. So, and similar to the activities, you have the possibilities to set these status flags, these rectangles or circles on a bar. We have a progress bar, this black line on the bottom, or these constraint symbols with these dashed lines. Or we have, and this is interesting, so-called suitable resources. So this is something which supports the interaction. I've set it up here on the allocation 20 on mark. Let's see what's happening here. So when I drag this one, or first I drag this one, you see everything, or just the bar moves. Nothing else is changed in the visualization. But when I move this one, certain resources get grayed out. So, and this is coming because I defined that this allocation has only a certain subset of suitable resources where this could be placed on. And I can place this, for example, drag this then to another resource. And I drag it now on another resource and drop it, I get my event again, as with all the other things. But in this case, it's not just a new start and end date, but we also have a new row ID, and this is Macy. So by this, I can see in this event that I dropped this bar on another resource. Okay. So now I did just some screenshots to get through all these visual blocks or visual elements we have. So another thing is we support, or we have so-called curves, and this is what you see here now on the bottom. So by this you can define curves on resources. So by this you can visualize that a certain resource, and when you define a curve and add this to a resource, you get this triangle here at the end, and then you have these elements here. So, and what you see here is that this outer line is the capacity curve. So you can define where this curves, this outer line should be, and you can define what the load is. And the load is in this case the grade area. So the capacity is just a line, and the load is a line filled to the bottom with a with the gray color, and what we don't see here, but when the gray area is bigger, so the load is bigger than the capacity, then the load is colored in red, so that you directly see this as an overload. So additionally, what we have are links.
Sasha, excuse me, I'm just quickly interrupting you because there was a question, how much is the cost for the add-in for development? So I would suggest that we have this discussion offline with you. So I will reach out to you via email, to the one who asked the question, after the webinar, and share all costing information. But this time here, I really would like to focus on the technology and the capabilities and not on the commercial part of it. So I will give you the information afterwards.
Okay.
Back to you, Sasha.
Thanks. So what we see here are links. So we support a visual link so that you can show certain relations between activities or allocations. And we have so-called entities. This is an element on the right side, so we can add an additional table on the right side, which are not resources or activities, but more in general, and therefore we call these entities. But the interesting part is that these are uncategorized elements, just summed up in the table on the right side, and then you can drag and drop them from the right side into the planning board and drop them there on a resource, for example. And by this, you can create new allocations. So we have date lines. So you can set these lines here, for example, additionally with a descriptive text on them. And we have a so-called period highlighter. Period highlighter is something different than the calendars. So you have in the background here still calendar information with white and gray backgrounds. But for example, for this standby, we called it standby resource here. In this application, you can give all the background another color. So the period highlighter is used to define a certain period and give this period a certain color and put this period highlighter then on a certain resource. We have symbols like these graphics here, so you can provide your own images, pass them over to the controller in, and then place them on different objects. For example, on allocations. And here we support that you put these symbols on the top left or on the top right. And in this case, we have two different symbols, a black lock and a gray lock. You can put these on resources. In terms of resources, they would be shown inside of the table here in one of the first rows. Or you can put these on activities. On activities is the same. It's shown in the table. And we support context menus. So you can define a context menu on all major objects in the visualization. And when you then do a right click, and in this case, I did a right click on this bar here, 10, 10, 15, I got this context menu. And when I click on one of these elements, we get an event again, which element was clicked. And then you can interact or act accordingly to what you've placed in there. So when you download this control it in, we have 3 supporting documents, and these are important. Maybe I just go on the next slide. So this is the overall model I was talking about now with all the objects. So what I showed you already are the activities, the allocations, the resources, you know what calendars are, and a slight introduction to curves, links, etc. But this is a model information how these different objects rely on each other. And for this we have an own document which comes with the download, and this describes all the stuff for this model and what we were thinking about when we created activities, resources, etc., and what's the background behind this. So when you start with this, please have a look at this document. This describes the overall concept. The second document we provide is the so-called functional definition document. This gives some more insight how the control-let-in can be used and which technology is used and it's based on, and how the architecture is when you make use of it. And the third document, and this is the most important one when it comes to all the objects we have here, defines the interface and all the properties of the objects we have. So when we start here with the activity, you have a long list with all the properties you can set. As I showed in the demo before, there we have, for example, the baseline start and end. And here you can see that these are passed over as date time values, and that these needs to be set to have a baseline. So this is a pretty long list with all the properties on all the objects. So this is the development documentation you get with almost 55 pages with all the properties you have. So just keep in mind, and this is important, the developer toolbox control-let-in is just a graphical component, but it's a native object inside of Dynamics 365. So you can just place it as anything else on a page. It's just living natively in Dynamics 365. You don't have any external connections to anything else. You don't have any external hosting, that you have any components running on other web servers, etc., where you need to connect to. So this is just an object you can interact with all the other objects on a page like you're used to. The connection to the application data and sending this data to the control-let-in is part of your application you are going to develop. And reacting on events and from fulfilling the underlying business logic of the application as well. So, and now we get back to this graphic I showed before. So this is the ISV product you are probably going to build. So you know which tables you want to connect and you want to visualize. So and therefore, in your code, you are fetching the data from these tables. You decide what you really want to show and how you want to show it. If you want to show it in kind of a resource view, or if you want to show it in a kind of an activity view. And then you create the objects I showed you before and which I described in the resource planning model. You create these or set these properties on these JSON arrays and JSON objects and pass them over with the function calls to the control-let-in. So, and for all the objects we have in the control-let-in, we have API calls, which are called or named add. For example, for the resources, we have add resources, we have update resources, and we have remove resources. And with these three calls, you can do more or less everything you need to do in the control-let-in. Because with this, you add new resources to the visual scheduler. You can update resources, or for example, allocations, if they got moved and you want to update the new start and end dates. Or when you want to remove certain objects from the visualization, you just need to trigger the remove function call. So the control-let-in is developed internally in HTML JavaScript, and therefore its natural living space is the web browser. And there, currently, the best performance is Chrome. So as the Internet Explorer is hopefully dying more and more, and Edge already skipped to the Chrome engine as well, so things start getting easier and better. So therefore, the web browsers should work pretty well. It can be run in the Windows client as well, but we really don't recommend it, because internally the Windows client is using a really old Internet Explorer to visualize these kind of control ins, and this is really bad. So the performance is bad, and the support of HTML JavaScript technology is really bad. So it works, but we really don't recommend it. The control.in itself is available with an AL interface and an CAL interface. So you can make use of this when you're developed for Business Central and the new versions, but we also provide this for NAV, and if you still have CAL projects. So, but the interface is more or less the same, and if you move over with your CAL project to AL and migrate, it should be pretty easy to migrate the control.in as well, because the interface is pretty much the same. So, and as Martin mentioned before, this control.in, the same control.in, is the core of our own extensions as well. So the extensions we are building, the VAPS, the VPS, and the VJS, are extensions which in the bottom part, so in the lower end, we have this control.in as our core as well, and make use of it. So, and therefore you can, if you make use of this, you can more or less build the same kind of extensions that we have built. So, and then the question is how to get it. And therefore, we provide a free trial version. It comes with the full functionality. You can test and build it for 30 days because we provide a license key, as you saw in the first demo. This license key is always limited to the end of the next month. But you have the full functionality. So you get all the functions in it. The link is shown here, and when we share these slides, you will get this as well, or you can find it on our website anyway in the Dynamics 365 Business Central area. Make use of the documents we provide with this, especially with the interface design document, because there are all the properties of all the objects described. Start with the out-of-box scheduler we provide. So there's a small demo project inside of this, which tries to read certain demo data from a Kronos database. So anyone who knows Linda Martin knows that this is a Kronos database. So there the code shows how to read some tables and then create resources out of these and send these over to the control.in. So, and yeah, start to make use of it and start tweaking it and changing the code we provide, which is just sample code and not intended to get into production, but play around with this.
Sasha, there's a question, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do we update the toolbox with the new release?
This is pretty easy because you just download the new toolbox, and in your project you have some folder where the control.in is in. So, and then just replace this folder with the new version, and this should it be. So yeah, and update the license key if the license key is old. If this answers the question.
Yeah, we already got a okay, thanks message. So thanks.
Good. Yeah, and then if you play around with this, ask. So we are happy. If you have questions, just get in contact to us so we can help you, because we're working with this over decades, and as written here, the likelihood is high that we already invented the wheel that you're about to invent. So as we have built multiple planning boards for multiple customers, we have probably ideas how to visualize things in certain ways. Yeah, and make use of the control in a good way. Yeah, and this is it. So let's get in contact if you have questions. So download, install, run, and play around with this. And if you have questions, just drop me a line per email and get in contact. Okay, so any questions? I don't see the chat here, so you need to.
Yeah, I see it, but so far there is no question, or then there are no questions. So then I would say thank you very much, Sasha, for taking us through this. I learned a couple of new things that are part of our product, which are part of our toolbox, which we now should make part of our products as well. So there was some new stuff for me. Hopefully more new stuff for all the guys on the call. And if you have questions, then as Sasha said, turn to us, but also download the toolbox, play with it, develop with it. There is a lot that you can do. As you know, we have production jobs and resource scheduling solutions, but we have seen people trying to and building like rental scheduler with it, dispatching boards, healthcare solutions. So there are a lot of cases where you might have time and resource centric planning data in your vertical solution where a visual front end might bring big value of your clients. And before you invent the visualization technique, then have a look at the toolbox, because this could be really a faster path to market for you guys. And now I spoke that long and there's no other question. So thanks all for joining us for this webinar, and thanks a lot, Sasha, for showing this. This was really awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome. And to all of you, have a nice day or evening, wherever you are. Bye.
Bye-bye.